You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have a guest on the line, a caller on the line, so if Dr. Jim Garrow, who is currently in Canada, and why don't we bring him into the conversation. Dr. Garrow, welcome to the Final Say Radio Show. How are you?
I'm well. How are Brett and John doing?
Well, I took my temperature earlier. I'm doing okay. It seems like it's 90 degrees outside, which is a quick change from 30 degrees, so I was just making sure I was physically well because it's such a hard transition here in the East.
Oh.
Outside of that, trying to keep up with the Obamas and the Bidens, that keeps us hot as well.
Speaking of shared insanity, you got little Kim and you got both Obama and Biden. Wow.
Well, I refer to them as the court jesters.
I agree.
So what do you have for us today?
Well, I just thought I'd call and say that I don't know if you remember me from other programs, but I'm the guy who owns the largest number of international schools in the country of China, teaching English, of course. But one of our schools are recently, I got a report. I deal with them early in the morning. Eastern time, I'm up at 4 in the morning having meetings at the end of the school day in China with our schools. So we have a school. In fact, our largest school is in Yantai, which is in Shandong province. And sharing the airport, the major airport for aircraft to come in, is the military base. So what our folks have been telling me is that there has been a huge increase in the numbers of military fighter jets, Chinese, flown in and sitting on the edges of the runway. In fact, there were over 100 of them that have suddenly shown up. So with the saber rattling going on with the little guy in Korea, China is certainly arming themselves should he decide to do anything. And if you look at the geography of where Yantai is, it is actually positioned to stop anyone from attacking the major centers of China from either South or North Korea.
Yeah, that's very interesting observation. Quite frankly, I was thinking about this at great length, and I've come to the conclusion that China may be very active in their public condemnation of either Korea, North Korea, South Korea, Japan in this situation. But I think that if something does break out, that China will sit this one out. Of course, they would be expected to protect their own borders and play I guess border security along North Korea, trying to prevent North Koreans from escaping into their, because they don't want to deal with that mess either. But I don't think this would be a similar situation to what we saw in the first Korean War, which I guess never ended really, where China would be sending troops and getting involved in this, because they certainly, I think if we end up back in war, I think it's going to escalate to a finality that would see, a lot of immediate action, destruction, and the absolute removal of this regime, but China won't be able to become involved. I think they understand what that would escalate to at this point. They understand that it would cost their economy probably trillions of dollars, but I could definitely understand why they would be moving assets, if you will, into the right locations for their own security interest. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just brought it up because I thought you guys had based the fact you were chatting about China. And I just happened in on the conversation that you might be interested in knowing that. In fact, I have received another call from an agency of the American government asking me.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, it's funny you say that. I'll give you some commentary and a quick historical anecdote, Jim. First off, I've traveled to China, not a ton, but maybe 4 times on business. I've been to a bunch of the major cities there, and being in high tech and electronics, clearly I've done a ton of business with the Chinese. I don't have a problem with the Chinese as a people. The government and the political body I have an enormous problem with. And in fact, this is why I believe so many of the Chinese folks who have been successful have been moving a lot of money into American real estate, because I don't think they trust their leadership any more than we do. If not, they would be putting all their money into growing, many of the beautiful growing cities in China. But I looked at the position. I was actually just pulling up. I hadn't heard of the city that you had mentioned, even though I'm generally familiar with the geography there. And it's interesting to note it's literally off the edge of the peninsula that faces North Korea. That would be in quick, easy fly zone to obviously to protect North Korea if they so choose. Although I don't think they would. But I think they may be more inclined if the country falls apart. You can imagine about 10 million people trying to rush what is a long, difficult to protect border from the land, because it's a mountainous regime. It's as hard to control for them as Afghanistan has proven for every foreign power. And probably the only way to control that would be an extreme show of force from the air, and obviously the use of that force. With that said, though, I do think it's very important to note that China, at least in my opinion, that I think China is a strong supporter and an instigator. I think China has enjoyed the cost, distraction, and discomfort caused by America and its allies from North Korea. All that being said, I think if it came down to any kind of noteworthy conflagration between the U.S. and China, I don't think China would risk that to come to the aid of North Korea. I don't believe that for a minute. Certainly not not in the foreseeable future in the next few years.
If I can jump in here, I find it interesting where you have gone in your thinking. I actually brought it out not because of the view that China would intervene against America. What I was thinking was that China right now is getting ready and prepared to hold Korea back, North Korea, because I don't believe that there's any respect being given the young Kim since he's come in. Let's face it, the Chinese, they like wisdom, and they like long-term wisdom. They don't like foolishness at all. And so we may not have heard a lot of berating of this young Kim coming in, but some of the moves that he's made, I am certain that there's been messages going back and forward to him, suggesting to him that he back off. And sure, there's a bit of encouragement in terms of the pressure that's on America, or the discomfort that America may feel. But in the long and the short of it, I think that China would intervene to stop Kim from doing anything foolish. Things are too, I guess, on the knife edge right now with politics in the whole region for China to let this guy go off the reserve.
Well, that's a very good point, Jim. So I definitely agree with that position. I think that you have probably subtle conversations that have occurred, like Samsung recently invested, Samsung or LG? I think Samsung recently invested or committed to invest upwards of $6.1 or $2 billion in some new technology plants into China. And so you can imagine these types of conversations where I'm sure red phones start ringing, where they say, "Hey, look, India called. They said for $500 million less we could put the plant, in Ahmedabad. Can you get control of this punk?" But I think to me it's an extension of what happens when you fire something up. I mean, it's to America's failing where. During the Clinton years, we paid virtually no attention to what Al-Qaeda was becoming, right? And you could point to many countries across the globe who've done similar things. When some punks serve their purpose, they empower them, and then when they don't serve their purpose, maybe they're not paying as much attention. And I do think that the young Kim, there's something clearly wrong. I don't want to be too lowbrow on the show here, but he almost looks like the product of inbreeding, right? And I mean, it's clearly there seems to be a lower quality to him than to his father and to his grandfather, and maybe that's it. Maybe he's just out of control. But you would think that they would, in the not too distant future, put him down, and the military would find another leader, because this is close to the boiling point. It's hard to imagine. It's easy to imagine something just happening very quickly in between North and South Korea. And I think once it happens, it because of the proximity and the number of missiles and the trigger happy nature of the North potentially, if something happens, there has to be nothing short of an immediate massive response by South Korea and America to try to disable the entire border military missile firing infrastructure and command and control, which means I don't see any kind of subtle measured response. I think either the Chinese help put a lid on this, our president, becomes a submissive fool and empowers them further, or it blows up and gets ugly really quick.
Wait, hold on. Our president isn't already a submissive fool?
Well, this is another opportunity for him to validate himself,
or validate the foolishness. Yeah.
So, by the way, I find it interesting. Just a quick side note. So, what you do in the business, I think, is actually very interesting because it kind of goes to the emotional comment I made right before you called in, Jim, is that you would think that there's a much higher level of appreciation among the people for what America has done for them and for the world, and how much better a place the world is than it was for them 15, 20 years ago under their own rule, or 50, 60, 70 years ago under somebody else's rule. And what you do is basically a bridge building exercise. So I commend you on what you do, because no matter what the political relationships are like, I think those human bridges are always paramount, either to prevent problems, or if problems do occur, to show that there's still a human touch between great nations that could bring civility back one day if it gets out of control.
I actually have a question for you, Jim.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about your schools and the types of programs that they have, and who would attend such schools? Are they just Chinese? Are they international students that are coming to China, is it?
Yeah, we're restricted in what we do. So we deal with the Chinese students and are given a lot of assistance from government and the military, the PLA, People's Liberation Army, and their intelligence units. Their kids are in our schools. The Central Committee of the Communist Party, their kids are in our schools. So we form the international department of many public schools within China, as well as private schools within China. So we kind of come in there and provide them with the English language instruction that puts them kind of at the leading edge of what's available to them in the whole country. So these people then are able to, in graduation, they're able to come over and get into Harvard, or get into Yale or Purdue or Vanderbilt or Cambridge, Oxford, the major universities in the world, being able to function, of course, in a high level of English. And for example, Hu Jintao's niece was in our school program, ended up at Harvard as Xi Jinping, the new leader of the Communist Party and president now of China. His daughter is in Harvard and started off in our nursery school program. So we've had a lot of the leaders, the governors, their kids are all in the schools. So, again, we stretch coast to coast in China. Our largest school, like I said, is in Yantai, where the military base is. So we have a funny nudge, wink, wink relationships with these people. We're seen to a degree as enemies because we're not communists, but we're also seen as partners in the process of education. And because we do it so well, we're held in fairly high regard. So we have a funny and interesting position with the Chinese leadership, and it's the oddest thing to be sitting across the table from a leader of a government, like a provincial government, or even, Xi Jinping years ago when he was asking for his daughter to be allowed into our schools. Very different position to have them actually, kind of begging us to allow their kids into our schools, and here they are, heading up some of the largest populations of the world.
Well, because many people who inherently respect the potential instability of an area understand at once how powerful their position is, but how frail it can be. It could be depending on who's the current leader. I will say, by the way, I was thinking here, kind of laughing at myself. You're in a position that's really odd because you're simultaneously like the bridge and the hidden plumbing. It's like the silent infrastructure of political cooperation as well as channels for espionage. So it's a pretty fascinating. There's like a hidden chapter in a Clancy novel here somewhere.
It's really an odd place to be positioned. You're right, absolutely right. But we've used it to advantage because, as you know, I think we have a philanthropic work saving baby girls from being murdered. So that produced a book which I wrote, the Pink Pagoda. And I didn't come on, by the way, to advertise that. I'm just stating that. But yeah, our program, Pink Pagoda Girls, saving baby girls from being murdered at birth. So we've had a great opportunity to impact, I think, positively all across the land of China by virtue of doing that, but also getting the cooperation, which is kind of odd. We fell into this cooperation from the highest levels of the intelligence community, who at first examined us very closely to find out if, in fact, we were child traffickers, which is, what had been reported to them, I think, originally. And after having looked us over for about 6 months, they realized, you know what? These guys are okay. They're good people. They're not on the killing list any longer. But we were looked very closely for termination.
Oh, that's interesting. I just want to bring up one relation. If you look at Europe, the history of Europe, you had intermarriages between leaders from all the different countries for centuries, and I always found it interesting that Europe was so at odds with one another, considering there's such an interrelation. And I would think that the Chinese provinces or even Asian countries, to some degree, aren't that dissimilar.
Well, yeah, exactly. And for a lot of the warlords, the only way they could get peace within different regions and between different cultures in China was to have that intermarrying, very much like the royalty of Europe did. And you're right to bring that up because it was a pacifying influence that wouldn't have happened if the warlords were left to do it. They'd wipe each other out. And of course, they recognized that. They weren't stupid people. They recognized that this has got to end one way or the other. And the alliances and alliances through marriage are the things that saved their culture.
We have to go to a break. If you wouldn't mind, if you can give your information to our producers so we could have you come on and join us again, that would be wonderful.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Would you like to give a plug to your organization or your website?
Oh, sure. www.pinkpagodagirls.com, and that's our charitable work, which I think is the most important thing we do. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to put you on hold, and she'll pick you right up. Thank you.
Thanks.